So anyway, so let's start. Start with where you normally start. Tell people your story and kind of how you got roped into this, because I assume at some point in your life, were living this clutter-filled, possession-filled American life that many of us do, and how you went from there to kind of where you are now.
Yeah, I grew up and have always lived very middle class. I mean, right smack dab in the middle. Never had never missed a meal. Was never in need in that way. But also
Yeah.
never, living extravagant. Always just pretty, I don't know, suburban American lifestyle is probably the best
Yeah.
way to say it. And um, despite having all my needs met, I usually say that there were kind of these two streams of discontent. I was always a little discontented with my money. Not just that I was always living paycheck to paycheck, despite getting pay increases. Like, just
Yeah.
shocking how we make more money, but it never seems to be there at the end of the month,
It
right?
works.
So paycheck to paycheck, and then where I was spending my money, or better, who I was spending my money on. I think I always had a desire for generosity. I grew up, even pastored for years, and so always grew up kind of having this mindset that I'd love to help people,
Yeah.
but could just never find the margin or
Yeah.
the space to do it. So always discontent with my money, and then I was also discontented with, I just say the focus of my life's energy is probably the best way to say it. And this came out on a Saturday morning. We were doing what most Americans do on the weekend: clean the house, run some errands, do some shopping. Spring cleaning. We were living in Vermont. I went out to clean the garage with my 5-year-old son, thinking we'd just pull everything out, pile it up in the driveway, hose it all down, and then get on with our lives, right? Like we
Yeah.
do as Americans. Well, my 5-year-old obviously didn't want to help me with the garage, and so he went to the backyard to play. And he's asking me like every 20 or 30 minutes to come play with him, and I'm always pushing him off. I can't. I gotta do my project. This is what we do. My neighbor kind of notices this whole thing taking place, and we have a short conversation just about owning homes and how much time and effort goes into it. And she returned with this sentence where she said, that's why my daughter's a minimalist. She keeps telling me I don't need to own all this stuff. And I'd never heard the term minimalist before, but I just remember looking back and this pile of dirty, dusty stuff piled up in my driveway I'd spent all morning taking care of, and knowing full well that my possessions weren't bringing happiness into my life. We'd all admit that, of course. But beyond that, as I noticed this pile of things, and then I noticed my 5-year-old son who'd been alone in the backyard all morning, just this realization that everything we owned wasn't only not making me happy, but it was actually distracting me from the very things that do bring happiness and joy and purpose and fulfillment
Yeah.
into our lives. And so, which is a very different realization. And it was the one that just spurred me on to say, I don't know why I own all this stuff. Why have I spent my whole life chasing, accumulating this stuff that's actually probably just taking me away from the things that really make me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think most people can resonate with that and can understand that. The thing that scared me when I read my first book on minimalism, and as I read a few more, I started to get a better understanding of particularly you and your approach with it. It's less scary than what I always thought it was. Like, where every house is like a museum, and there's literally one fork and one knife and one plate, and just all this stuff where it's like, who wants to live like that? I don't want to do that. So anyway, I say all that because your approach, what you call rational minimalism, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
can you explain a little bit of that and kind of how maybe it makes it less scary than some people think it should be?
Yeah, sure. Because the first thing I did was I went to the computer and searched what is minimalism, and up pops all these people online who were living a minimalist life, they called it. And I met a guy named Colin who lived out of a backpack and moved every 4 months to a different country. And I met Dave Bruno in San Diego, who owned just 100 things, and that was
Yeah.
his number. He wasn't owning any more or any less. Met Tammy and Logan Strobel in Portland, who moved into like a 250 square foot home. And it was very interesting because I could see how my possessions weighing me down, distracting me from bigger and better things that my life could be about. But I didn't want to move every 4 months. I didn't want to live in a 200 square foot home. We had groups meeting in our house, two or three groups a week. I didn't want a sheet of paper with everything I had listed on it. And so I think we just realized very early on that the minimalism for us was going to look different than minimalism for anyone else. And it should, because I have different values than any of them. Traveling the world isn't an important value to me, but being hospitable is. And so eventually we defined it like this. Minimalism is the intentional promotion of the things we most value and the removal of anything that distracts us from it.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it's what do I want to accomplish with my life? What tools and possessions do I need to help me do that? And then what is all the other stuff that I've just unintentionally held on to, there's actually just sucking time and energy away from doing the things that really bring fulfillment into my life. So in that way, it's very freeing, to people. And I didn't use the word rational minimalism, but someone left a comment on the blog one time and said, "I really like your minimalism. It sounds so rational."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's probably a pretty good term. It's a very thoughtful approach to what do I want my life to be about? So what do I need to keep, and what can I get rid of so I can do more of that?
Yeah. Yeah, and that just feels good to me, because it's, so as we were going through this process, Linda and I, and and for everybody watching or listening, I don't know, probably about 9 months ago, a year ago, we kind of dove in headlong with this and really made a purge and got rid of a whole lot of stuff, and I was floored at how much clearer my head was. Like, I think that was just one of the big things for me, and honestly, the simplicity of my closet. So I went from probably 30 something pairs of shoes. I like shoes, but there's no reason for me to have many pair of shoes, and cut that down probably 70-80%. And I did the same thing with my shirts and pants, and just really simplified everything I had going on. And it just feels so good. It's like I only have things I love now, and it really, really feels good. But as we were going through this process of just getting rid of our stuff, and there's those inevitable kind of forks in the road where you have this object, and it's like, but I don't want to get rid of it, and so you have to ask yourself, well, why are you keeping it? Can you replace it if you need to? And I don't know. I found that we had a lot of those little forks in the road, but even if, I'm trying to think. I mean, and I guess you should answer this, but what do you think the best way to approach those things are when you have those objects where it's like you can't really decide if you should get rid of it?
Yeah. Obviously, it's all case by case on some of those things. It's tough to lump anything into one big deal. There's a number of factors, I think. One of the, Dave Bruno, who ended up writing a book about the 100 thing challenge, the list. He had an interesting subtext in his book, the 100 thing challenge: reduce, reuse, rejigger. And he talked about when he got down to 100 things, that one of the surprising things that he discovered was that he could actually get by pretty well with the things that he had, because he discovered new ways to solve problems. Yeah. And he discovered that he really could get by with less stuff than he ever thought. Maya Angelou says it so well. She says, we need so much less than we think we need. Mm-hmm. And we're just never forced to kind of solve those problems on our own when we keep holding on to things. And the other problem, like the other thought that I try to help people think through, is that we don't usually realize the emotional anxiety, maybe the physical distraction that all these things are in our home. And so we think, oh gosh, it would cost me so much money to go replace, whatever it might be. But we don't even realize how we walk past that item 1,000 times a year sitting on our workbench. I'm thinking of some tool that,
Yeah. Yeah.
like it distracts us every single time we walk by it. And we rarely count the cost of what it is to actually hold on to something. And, someone sent me an email one time and she's like, okay, so what's the big deal if I have an extra set of china in my basement? And I said, that's a good question. And I wrote back and I said, if you just had one extra set of china in your basement, then it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But the problem is no one has just one extra set of china in their basement. We have boxes and boxes of things, and we've held on to this and we've held on to that, and it just becomes very cumbersome and very distracting for anything else that we want to do and can accomplish with our lives.
So, being a pastor, I'm curious what you have found in the Bible. And I mean, there's a few obvious kind of references to this type of living, but how have you reconciled everything, or how has what you found in the Bible kind of motivated you one way or another with all this?
You know what it's done, probably, and I can list some of the specific examples that mean a lot to me, but if you want to. But more than that, you know what it's done is it's totally changed my view of everything that Jesus said about money and possessions. Because I used to read anything that Jesus would say about possession, if you have 2 tunics, give one to the poor. Don't stockpile treasures here on earth. Woe to you who are rich. The rich young ruler walks away. Yeah. Like all these things, and I would read them, and you know what I thought? I would say, man, Jesus wants me to live a really crummy life. like Jesus is calling me to give up everything that is fun and just live this boring, destitute life so that I can help the poor. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll get rewards in heaven at the end.
Yeah.
And that's the trade-off. But as we started owning less stuff on purpose, and as we got rid of things that we didn't need and stopped buying new things, and suddenly found out that we had more time, we had more energy, we had more freedom, we had less stress, less worry. We were a better example for our kids. We found greater contentment and generosity and gratitude. Like we found all these life-giving benefits of owning less. And suddenly everything that Jesus said wasn't about calling me to sacrifice now for the sake of him, but it was just an invitation to a better way to live. He knew what he was talking about.
Go figure,
right? Which I guess is like everything else. He says, don't steal and don't commit adultery and don't be dishonest. Well, how come? Because those are pretty miserable ways to live your life when you get down to it. And so he says, don't stockpile treasures here on earth. How come? Well, because there's actually a better way to live. And so it's not the American dream. It's Jesus' dream. We kind of confuse the two, and I referenced some of them, but suddenly it was, hey, he was actually just giving me instruction on a better way to live life than the world tells me I should live it.
Yeah, that's really good. Because I feel like I've done the same thing. I haven't seen it in that light, but it's like the deeper you go in the Bible and the more you learn about any principle, it seems like there's always these positive side effects that God has for the things that he does. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's just a perfect example. And regardless of what the main motivation was, if the main motivation is to give more so you can help the poor, well, the side effect is you benefit from this. Or if the focus is here, I want to help you by giving rid of your stuff, and the benefit is you're helping other people who are giving away. So regardless of what it is, it's like I just love that when you see those things. When you follow those biblical kind of principles and guidelines, and just to get to see all these wonderful side effects, because most things have negative side effects. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
that just like Luke chapter 3 is this very fascinating passage where John the Baptist is preparing the way for Jesus, and the Israelites come to him and they say, okay, what should we do to get ready for this Messiah that you're promising? What do we have to do to get ready for the kingdom of heaven? And John the Baptist tells the people, he says, if you have 2 coats, give one to the man who has none. If you have food, do the same. He tells the tax collectors, don't collect any more money than you're required to. And then he tells the soldiers, be content with your pay. Don't accuse people falsely, and don't extort money. And it's very interesting as you mention what the side effects are for us personally of some of these things, because I would read that and I would think, number one, that'd be pretty hard, but number two, okay, I see how the poor would benefit from me sharing with them, but this wasn't about how do I help the poor. This was how do I prepare my heart for Christ.
That's good.
And John says, get rid of the stuff that you don't need. And how come? Because number one, we find out that it's pretty hard to get rid of the stuff that we don't need. That it actually is very difficult. And suddenly we discover that maybe we are a little more tied to the world than we ever thought. Maybe we do love the world a little bit more than we ever would have said that we did. Yeah. And then we start to realize, I just think all the lies that we bought into, like why do we have more TVs in our house than people living in it, right? Yeah. Why do we have basements full of things and garages full of stuff? Why did we buy a bunch of things that we didn't need in the first place? And then I think we started to realize that we're a little more susceptible to the world's lies, and we actually believe it far more than we ever realized we did.
Yeah. And the thing that stands out from what you just said about preparing your hearts for Jesus to come, then it's like, we're getting closer and closer to the second coming, and I feel like the church as a whole is becoming more and more distracted, and even if it's not from things per se, which it surely is, it's there's just so many distractions, and that kind of leads into maybe this whole other idea of information diets, thinking a little more minimalistically as far as what we're consuming and the constant entertaining of ourselves that I think so many of us naturally tend to, with Facebook and Pinterest and whatever. I mean, Hulu and Netflix, it's like just watch stuff and be entertained nonstop long and never have a minute just to sit and to think, or let alone get alone and pray, So anyway, that's pretty intriguing.
It's solitude is very difficult. I mean, it is hard to be quiet, not just because we're so stimulated and so used to being stimulated. It's just difficult because we're forced to sit in who we are a little bit. I had a college class, and part of the assignment was we had to spend 2 one-hour blocks each week in total silence. We couldn't bring a Bible to read. We couldn't bring a prayer list or worship music, anything. You just had to just sit quietly for an hour, and then we had to record our thoughts. It ended up being like one of the most heightened seasons of spiritual growth in my life. Wow. But it was incredibly difficult because when you do that, you start to realize, I think, the depravity of our hearts, right? Like you start to look at your life and some of the things that have motivated you and some of the things that you said and why you said them and what some of these things are that number one, that we need Jesus for, but I think it's just far easier to put on a television show when things get hard rather than being forced to sit in, why do I feel this way and what is motivating me in most of my life. Yeah,
and kind of wrestling through and going through some of those things that maybe need to be gone through rather than just burying them.
Yeah.
We're getting pretty deep here.
Anyway, I'll say sorry.
We're gonna be I don't know, psychiatrists when we're done with all this.
Sorry, but
no, I let us down there. It's not a bad thing. I mean, this is important stuff. I mean, this is these are just really important things. So I'm glad we're chatting about it.
And it is related to this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, it is related to minimalism. And as we began getting rid of things, I remember commenting to my friend one time just how how emotionally difficult it was. Not that I was attached to things, but just the thought process of, that thing that you talk about, that do I keep it? Do I get rid of? Why is this so difficult? And he wrote back, he made a comment very wisely. He said, it seems to me that minimalism would force questions of value on
Yeah.
your life. Like,
Oh yeah.
as you're going through your house, you're forced to ask, okay, what do I want my life to be about? And what is it going to be? And this process just spurs intentionality in all areas of life that
Yeah.
I just don't think we discover anywhere else.
Yeah. Very well said. I agree. Um, so I guess for so here's the thing. So this is intimidating to a lot of people. I know it was a little bit for me. It really was for Linda, my wife. People I talk to, because in a little bit of a way, I'm becoming a little bit of an evangelist for minimalism as a whole. Like some of my friends who have seen what we're doing, are like, what's the deal? Why are you doing this? So it's forcing me to have a little bit of an explanation of why and defend it to an extent. But anyway, so all that to just say, what are some good kind of practical first steps that you typically recommend for somebody who just wants to test the waters
Yeah.
and see?
Yeah, that's good. Most people, when we have this conversation, number one, very few people disagree with me. I think when you get through like when they first hear minimalism, they're like, oh, I don't want any of that. But when you get into the description of what I'm talking about and how it benefits, most people think, oh yeah, you're right. I need to, do something.
Yeah.
The problem is most minds rush to like the hardest thing in their life that they'd ever have to get rid of, right? Oh, I love books. I could never get rid of my books. I could never get rid of my yarn. I love I love shoes. I can never get rid of shoes, right? Like they always rush to the hardest thing. And so I would say you don't start at the hardest thing in your house to get rid of. Start with the very easy things. And so literally I started in my car. We had pulled the cars out of the garage to clean it. And as I pulled the car in, I'm just looking around and there's just a whole bunch of stuff in the car that didn't need to be there, like Happy Meal toys and CDs that no one listened to, and ketchup packets and sunglasses and maps and like all these things that just didn't even need to be there. And so I just grabbed it all and I put it to the side. And the next morning I sat in my car and it felt so freeing, like just so refreshing that there wasn't all this clutter around me. And I say if you want to get started, like start in an easy, livable area. I mean, grab a lived-in area, grab a bag, grab a box, and just grab everything that you don't even want there, that you don't even want in your house anymore. And then just sit in that for a little while and see if you like it better. I think most people will. And then, you try another area of the house. You try, the bedroom, the closet. You try to get rid of some clothes. You try to get rid of some old souvenir cups in the cupboard that don't need to be there. And I think as you gain momentum, you're kind of noticing how this is improving your life, and it gives you momentum. So when you get to the books, or when you get to the yarn, when you get to the shoes, you have a little momentum behind you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, literally, I would just say go in your living room and just grab everything that you don't even want in your living room anymore and see how it feels, and then go try another room that would be easy to tackle.
Yeah, and that's what we did. We just went room by room, and and the really surprising thing for me was that I still, almost 9 months, a year in, I don't remember exactly what it is, but I still get a thrill whenever I realize, oh, I don't need that. I can get rid of that. It gets me excited, and especially because so a lot of the stuff we've given to Goodwill, but a lot of it we've sold on Craigslist or eBay, and like I wrote that post 6 months ago or whenever. I made over $2,000 in a month just selling a lot of the stuff on Craigslist. So so you can actually put some more money back in your pocket, if you need it, or you can bless the heck out of your neighbors or people at Goodwill or other charities. So anyway, yeah, obviously I'm sold. So okay, so I want to, for people who want to get a little bit more kind of motivation to do this and maybe find out a little bit more information. And this is what worked for Linda. So I read a couple books and then I kind of explained it to her and she's like, I'm like, just read this book. And then she read, I don't remember if she read one of your books first or somebody else. I don't recall. But as soon as she read that book, she was like sold. And then she like kind of started waning a little bit after a few months. And then she read another book and then she was like committed. So there's something about, I think reading and diving deeper into the subject a little bit. And thankfully, you have a whole bunch of books. Is there one that you would point a beginner to at this point?
Yeah, I would send them to the book Simplify, which is it's just digital, $2.99, Kindle, Nook. They're available there. The PDF's available. It's very short and it reads very quickly. I mean, I think you can read in 45, 60 minutes, and it just makes the case for minimalism. It's not going to say, here's what socks to keep and here's what socks to get rid of, right? But it gives the overall idea of it, and I think people find it very motivating.
Yeah.
If you have kids, Clutter Free with Kids is a good overlap. If you have kids and worried about that part, I'd read Clutter Free with Kids. If you don't have kids, I just read the book Simplify. I don't think anyone needs to read both of them. There's a lot of overlap between them, so that's where I would send people. And I would agree that I don't think I would be where I am today if I wasn't writing about this all the time. And so I was always thinking about it and always noticing kind of consumerism around me and how it was affecting me. And that's what propelled me forward. And for becoming minimalist, I mean, I write a lot just about owning less and the benefits of it. And I just keep going back to it. And we just need to hear that. We see like 5,000 advertisements a day that tell us to buy more and buy whatever they're selling. And we just need we bought into that in the first place. So we need a voice somewhere, and there's other people writing about it. If a different blog resonates better with someone, then they should be reading that. But just to be constantly kind of rechecking and reevaluating what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's good. All right, man. Well, it was good chatting. Thanks for coming on. And I appreciate all your wisdom and insight.
Well, words anyway. Hopefully there's some wisdom in there.
Oh,
no,
definitely.
this is fun. It was a good conversation.
All right. Take care.
You bet.